Greg Peterson here, and I want to thank you for listening to the Urban Farm Podcast. We wouldn't be able to keep doing these great shows without you. So as a token of my appreciation, I'd like to offer you access to a list of our top 10 episodes I personally find most inspiring. If you enjoy the Urban Farm Podcast but don't have time to listen to every one, then you will love this list. Although all our guests have great information to offer, if you are short on time, these 10 are must-listens. To get access to the top 10 most inspiring podcast episodes, text FARMER to 44222. That's FARMER to 44222. And enjoy listening.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the Grow Your Own Food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Allison Duffy to talk about her experience with food preservation. Allison has been growing and preserving food for over 15 years. She is a master food preserver, trained through the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, and holds a master's degree in gastronomy from Boston University. She has written about food for various publications, including the Boston Globe, Backpacker Magazine, and Taproot Magazine, as is the author of the book Preserving with Pomona's Pectin. She regularly writes and develops recipes for the Pomona Pectin Company and blogs at her own website, canningcraft.com. Plus, she teaches canning and preserving classes. Allison lives on several acres in mid-coast Maine with her husband, Ben, and their 2 young boys, where they tend an apple orchard, how cool is that, look after a way too big vegetable garden, take care of chickens, and put up as much food as they can manage. Welcome to the show today, Allison.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I am happy to have you. I always love to talk about canning. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Food is one of those things that I've been interested in ever since I was little and did a lot of cooking and experimenting growing up. So when I, was in my 20s, I finally had a little bit of extra space where I could start a vegetable garden. It sort of was a no-brainer for me to start growing stuff, and then that led to preserving for me because, I had all this food, kind of taught myself how to do it initially through using books and just, learning whatever I could. And so it was just something that I did because I love to do it. And then that, all the way along there, I was doing sort of some freelance food writing on the side from my other work that I was doing unrelated to food. And that eventually led me to pursue a master's degree in gastronomy from Boston University, which was really a fantastic opportunity. It was focused on, food from a cultural perspective, and it was really an interesting few years when I did that. And then shortly after that, I had my 2 children, and through that process, I was became more focused on less sort of the heady aspects of food and more on the kind of practical, tangible aspects. And so I I had been preserving before, but I kind of got reinterested in it. And that's the time when I took the Master Food Preserver course through the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, which was really such a great opportunity and the right thing at the right time, because even though I had been preserving for a while, I was all self-taught. And so, there were some things I wasn't so sure about. And so the course was really filled in all kinds of gaps, taught me all kinds of new techniques and information, and also made me feel confident to kind of move to the next level with writing and teaching, that sort of thing.
So you use the words tangible and practical aspect to describe your interest in food and preserving and cooking. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's such a visceral activity. It's so physical. I find that, and I say it in comparison to where I was coming from previously when I was doing my graduate work, which was very much more academic, which I also really enjoyed. But the time in my life was one where I was really focused on the immediate. I had really young kids, and it was all about here and now and making meals. And so that's what I guess that's one of the things that I love the most about preserving is that it's just so, it's practical and it's useful. And it's just, it's a very physical activity that you do. And I find that when I'm engaged in that kind of activity, I'm just completely engrossed in what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about all kinds of other things. And I really love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Almost a meditation, huh?
Absolutely it is. Definitely.
Yeah. And I know that Heidi and we cook dinner most nights together, and it's an activity that we do and love to do together. So I got it. Cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great family kind of thing for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about Pomona's. I have some history with Pomona's Pectin. I actually love the product. How did you get connected with Pomona's Pectin and then end up writing a book about it?
Well, so interestingly, I was introduced to Pomona during the Master Food Preserver class that I took, and so I tried it out, and I was completely hooked after that primarily because, not only is it easy to use, but for me the big selling point is just that you have to use so little sweetener, and I love that. For me that's the biggest reason that I love it. I love being able to make jams and jellies with maple syrup and honey rather than sugar if I want to. So I personally was, immediately sold on it. And then as I started doing more teaching, that's just what I used because I liked the product. And then I also did some appearances on a local television station where I made jam with the host of the show, and I did several of those. And so I was using Pomona's because that's what I used. And so as it turned out, Mary Lou from Pomona's happened to come across, they already were in, I should back up to say they were already in discussions with a publisher about a book, but they didn't have anyone to write it. And
my gosh.
So she happened to come across my my spot on the news station on television. She saw it online, of course, but because I was talking about Pomona's. And so that's when the publisher then contacted me, and we, went from there.
Nice. So it's called Preserving with Pomona's Pectin. So tell us about the book.
Well, so the book is basically how all the different, not all, but many, many things that you can use Pomona's for. Now, we stuck with jams, jellies, preserves, conserves, and marmalades. So all the basic classic types of gelled products that you can do. I should say there are more things you can do with Pomona's that we don't cover in here, like that I don't cover in the book, like you can make gel candies and that sort of thing. We didn't include those in the book. But so I broke it up into those categories that I mentioned of different types of gelled preserved products. And there are, I believe it's 75 recipes that I came up with for this. And but before you get to the recipes, there's a whole long section on exactly what you need to do to make these recipes and to use the boiling water bath canner to can. So it's a big sort of primer on canning, on boiling water bath canning before you get to the recipes.
Nice.
And a lot of color photographs, and the publisher did a great job with that.
Beautiful. So for those people that don't know what pectin is, and specifically Pomona's Pectin, please tell us, would you?
Sure. So pectin is sourced typically from the peels of citrus fruits or apples. So many jams and jellies, you can make pectin without an added without an added pectin. But this is this makes it a little bit easier to have a pectin that you can add. My personal opinion, the difference about Pomona's versus other types of pectin is that Pomona's is what's known as a low methoxyl pectin. And what that means is that it jams with the addition of calcium or the presence of calcium rather than the presence of sugar. And that is a significant difference from most traditional pectins, what I call traditional pectins, traditional added pectins. They require a tremendous amount of sugar to gel properly. That's just how the pectin works.
Right.
Whereas Pomona is different than that, and that's what I happen to really like about it.
So, so calcium is the gelling agent along with the pectin rather than sugar.
That is correct. That is correct.
I add calcium every time, just like I'm supposed to, and I've always wondered what that was for.
Yes. That is what it is for. And interestingly, some fruits have higher levels of calcium naturally than others, so that's why you don't always add the same amount of calcium when you're making the jam. That's pretty straightforward to use once you get the hang of it.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me about food growing and food preservation that you do personally for you and your family? Because you in your bio, it said a garden that was way too big. Tell me about that.
Okay, it might not be way too big for everyone, but I'll tell you it is for me. It's 100 by 100 and feet. I'm speaking, 100 feet by 100 feet, and it's pretty much, I do have help from other family members, but it's kind of my thing. It's mostly me, and so I grow. We've been expanding it over the years. It wasn't always this big, but that's where it's been for the last few years, and we've been in our location here for about 5 years. So we've been going through a long process of, amending the soil and making it more effective. It was not ideal soil when we moved in, so it was very clay heavy, so we had a lot of work to do. But we try to grow a lot of our kind of staple vegetable, I think of as staple vegetables, things that we like to eat all winter long. And as much as I love to grow sort of more fun things, I'm finding that because it's so much work, I'm definitely moving towards emphasizing the things that I really like to eat all winter.
Yeah.
And that store well as well.
Like what?
So I grow a lot of kale, a lot of Swiss chard. We have more recently had success with onions and beets since we've made the soil more fluffier.
Yeah.
With clay heavy, they did not do well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and then we grow a lot of winter squash, grow a lot of tomatoes, green peppers, eggplant, leeks, green beans, cucumbers, a whole lot.
So,
a whole lot of different things.
So
potatoes. Go ahead.
Potatoes?
Yep.
Do you just store the potatoes or do you can them?
So the potatoes I store.
Yeah.
In the root cellar. Or our makeshift root cellar, I should say.
Right. I'm a little jealous. I have my lot here in Phoenix at the urban farm is 13,000 square feet, and I probably have realistically 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of garden space. You have 10,000 square feet of garden space, and a root cellar.
Right. Well, it functions that way anyway. We basically turned our damn cellar into something that works.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Perfect. So a couple of questions about your list. For people that don't know, what is the difference between a winter squash and a summer squash? And you don't grow winter squash in the winter and summer squash in the summer, do you?
That's right. No, that's correct. You do not. They're all summertime crops. But so the winter squashes are what you think of as the harder squashes, like the orange squashes, the butternuts, the pumpkins, the acorn squashes, and I imagine they're called winter squashes just because they store through the winter. I actually am not sure about that, but that's my assumption.
That would make
why
sense.
They call them winter squashes. Yeah. And then the summer squashes are the zucchinis and the yellow squash and the other types of soft-skinned squash that look kind of like zucchini. And those don't last in a root cellar in the way that other squashes do. Yeah. Though I should clarify, in storing winter squashes, I don't actually put those in the root cellar because those like slightly drier, warmer conditions than our base.
So the other thing you mentioned that you said you grow a lot of is kale. And
yes,
kale grows voraciously here in Phoenix as well, actually all through the winter here. And, I've dehydrated some of it and, we have it practically every night in, some kind of braised green dish that we do. Do you can it? How do you preserve kale?
I do not can it. You can can it, but I freeze it. So what we do is I blanch it and chop it up, remove the stems, and put it in freezer bags. And then we usually saute it super easy once to pull out for a meal. Basically, just throw it in a saute pan with garlic and olive oil, and it's fantastic. And it's what's so nice about it too is that it's halfway prepared already.
Right,
so
exactly. Yeah. When you say blanch, that's a preserving process. What do you mean?
Okay, so many vegetables, before you freeze them, blanching is the process of submerging them in boiling water for a very short period of time. It depends on it's usually 2 to 3 minutes, depending on the kind of vegetable that you're preserving. The reason for that is that so basically you blanch the vegetable in boiling water, then you submerge it in cold water very quickly to cool it down, and then you freeze it. And the reason for that is that the blanching process stops the enzymes from working, so it breaks down more slowly in the freezer. Yes. Basically, you'll have a fresher product for longer if you blanch it. It can get a little mushy.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
So
There you go.
how long do you blanch, because I'm going to go do this now, how long do you blanch kale for?
So I always look it up whether it's 2 or 3, but I think kale is 2 minutes.
Got it.
I think there are just a few of the green vegetable. I think it's like collards that might be 3 minutes. Most everything is 2. Except for really big Brussels sprouts, you might do 3. But basically 2 minutes in boiling water. But the idea too is that once you put it in the boiling water, you want to bring it back up to a boil as quickly as possible. So you can't put a whole lot in at once, you need a really big pot. So I actually do, when I do blanching, generally I do it outside on one of those propane burners so I can use my very large canning pot, even though I'm not actually canning, it's just a huge pot that I have, so that I can have a large quantity of water so I can bring it back up to a boil quickly.
Right.
And then it's equally important to submerge it in cold water for a few minutes to cool it down quickly too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we just got a 5-gallon, is that a 20-quart?
Yeah.
Stainless steel cooking pot for, doing things just like this. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love those. Can't have enough of those.
Yeah, exactly. So you've involved your husband and children in this process. How are they involved?
So, well, for Ben and I, it's really our whole homestead here is a joint effort for sure. The vegetable garden happens to be mostly my thing, but Ben does most of the work with our apple orchard. Oh. So, and he also has done a lot of the heavy lifting with the preparation of the garden too. The soil amendments and all that. So we're in an old farmhouse built in 1812. So as a result, there's some very old trees here. So there was an old apple orchard. We probably have like 40 trees that not that we're picking apples from all of them, but that they were kind of buried and hidden among the brush.
Oh, nice.
So they're in various states of falling down, and we've been slowly, since we've been living here over the past 5 years, in the process of revitalizing those trees. And Ben has really done the vast majority of that. He's done a lot of pruning and grafting and all that to try to bring the trees back to producing well. And we've made some progress. So we've gotten, some years we have gotten an excellent harvest, other years not nearly as much, but they produce a remarkable amount considering that they're really old trees.
Nice. So you have an abundance of apples. What do you do with those?
We do. So we do a few different things. I would say the biggest thing that we do is make cider.
Oh, nice.
So we press out a lot of, this past fall was not a good apple year. We didn't get that much this year. The year before, we pressed out about 80 gallons. So a lot of that we froze in just regular, the same kind of containers that you buy cider at the store in. A lot of it we froze. I canned a bunch of it in mason jars, and then we also fermented a bunch of it too. So that's what we did with the cider. And then additionally, I made tons of applesauce. So that works really well because our apples because we don't spray the trees, they definitely have, blights. Not a blight as in a sickness, but like they've got, they're not perfect apples. Blemishes,
right.
I guess.
Blemishes.
So as a result, they're not great for eating. They taste good, but they're not the kind of thing you just want to pick up and bite, except when you're out picking to taste them, but in the orchard. But so I do a lot of making sauce, and then I dehydrate a lot of them too, which I love doing. They're so good that way.
Yeah,
so,
apple chips.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. So how are the kids involved in the growing, harvesting, and preserving, and what do they think of it? And actually, how old are they?
So they are 8 and 10, two boys. And so they do quite a bit. And it's interesting. It really, I should say quite a bit. They don't do the sort of really heavy lifting, but they help out on a regular basis when I ask them to. Sometimes they're self-motivated to do it. Other times they don't want to do it at all. It's more like, okay, just the same kind of, you've got to make your bed. Okay, you've got to help me pick green beans today. So there's definitely, I would say it's more that, in the summertime I'll say, okay, I really need help for an hour doing, whatever it is that I'm doing in the garden.
Right.
But then there are other times when they both get totally into it. And like my older son really wanted his own garden last year. So he
nice.
Shared a bed on his own and planted what he wanted. And, it got mostly covered with weeds, but that's okay. He was pretty excited when he did still get some vegetables despite the weeds and all. So he was excited about that. And along those same lines, I definitely notice a trend with them, particularly my older one, that if it can kind of be he's more interested in it. So, for example, we just tapped our maple trees just last weekend to make maple syrup. And so he really wanted his own tree this year, that he could tap himself and boil down himself and all. So that seems to be a motivating factor for him.
Yeah.
But then with the actual preserving part, they both do a lot of that. We, for really since they were little, we've been, they help to increasing degrees as they get older. They make a lot of jams. They help me with, blanching the green beans, and they help me with a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, it's a really nice way to just to be together, I think.
Right.
As I said, they don't always love it, but when we're in a good place, it's a really nice way to be together. So.
Yeah. What difference is it going to make for them in their lives?
I kind of feel like, they're going to know where the food came from. That's the sort of a simple answer, I guess, but an important one. They're going to know where it came from. They know what goes into growing it. It just doesn't magically appear.
Right.
And I think they'll appreciate the hard work of growing it. And my hope, I don't know this, but I think about the things that I had to do as a kid that I didn't always love, that I really appreciate as an adult. And I'm hoping that they'll think of gardening that way and preserving their own foods that way. They'll think, wow, oh yeah, right, I see why Mom had us do all this now.
Right.
I'm hoping that's how they'll think of it. But I just think it's a really important life skill to be able to know how to do it.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah.
So, talking about food preservation, what happens for me in my mind is food preservation is canning. And there is so much more to it. So can you kind of tease apart this whole notion of food preservation?
Sure. So, there are a lot of different methods for preserving food, and there are usually a couple different methods that can work for an individual food. But I found just from personal experience that certain kinds of food I like to preserve with one method, and other kinds of food I like to use another method. Some of it's just personal preference, some of it's based on kind of the nature of the food itself. So they're all, as I see it, they're all good options for putting food away to eat for later. And you just have different methods and tools to do it.
So what are those methods?
Canning is certainly a big one.
Yeah.
There is boiling water bath canning, and there is pressure canning. And so boiling water bath canning is what you use. The kind of foods that you can boiling water bath can are anything that is considered high acid, which means that it has a pH of less than 4.6. Now, what that means, practically speaking, that would be with your salsas, chutneys, pickles, dilly beans, jams and jellies, most all of them. And so those are all the kinds of things that can be boiling water bath canned. So those are great foods for people to start canning with if they haven't done this before.
Right.
They're because boiling water bath canning is easy to get into. It takes less equipment, and those are foods that most people like. So they're kind of your nice kind of fun on the side sort of foods. They're not sort of the nuts and bolts staple foods necessarily. So that's boiling water bath canning. Then there's pressure canning, and that is for anything that is considered a low acid food, which is with a pH of greater than 4.6. And that would be if you were canning vegetables that didn't have any added acid. So dilly beans, for example, have added vinegar, which makes them a high acid food. However, if you were to can green beans by themselves with just water, they would be a low acid food, and you would need to pressure can them. Also, any meats. Basically, meats, dairy products, anything other than acidified vegetables or fruits need pressure cans.
I have a question for you on that, because I have a pressure canner, and I pretty much just pressure can everything. Is there something wrong about that?
You know what? That's funny. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've never done that though, but I don't see why there would be a problem with it. It's just that you don't have to with the high acid stuff. Right.
All right. Cool. So that's canning or jarring. So, and we talked about dehydrating.
Yes.
What else is there?
So the big one for me that I probably do the most of on a personal level is freezing.
Yeah.
And that's primarily because I prefer. I should back up. Most of what we make is kind of the real staple vegetables that I like to have all winter. So green beans and broccoli and Swiss chard. And I prefer those frozen So that's why I do it that way.
Yeah.
So rather than pressure canning them. So freezing is also really easy too. You don't have, unlike with canning where you do have to make sure you have to make sure you've got the right kind of canner for safety reasons. Unlike with canning, freezing, there are really no safety issues with it beyond the normal. Make sure your hands are clean and that sort of thing.
Right. Exactly.
You can quality might be a little different depending on how effectively you blanch and cool off your product, but it's not going to be unsafe. So that's also another way for people who perhaps don't feel ready to try canning for whatever reason. They can freeze stuff, and in fact, you can even freeze jams and jellies. In fact, I do that a bit when I'm in a hurry. I don't feel like getting the scanner out. Right. Not stuff I'm going to store for a while, but stuff that I know I'm going to eat next week anyway, so just stick it in the freezer. So freezing is great that way. I mean, the only equipment it requires obviously is a freezer, and then if you're doing vegetables, you're going to want to blanch them. Not all vegetables, but most of them. And then, just freezer containers. Any kind of, the freezer bags or the freezer or the other plastic containers, or you can even freeze in mason jars as long as you freeze in the wide mouth jars so they don't crack.
Right, and then they're easier to get the stuff out with the wide mouth jars.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Much easier. So that's a great option.
So how can someone learn more about how to preserve?
So there are a couple of ways. So there are some great books out there that I really like that are kind of just great go-to books for guidance. The Ball books have a great series of books. I happen to have in front of me the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving, which I like a lot. And they also have, the Ball Blue Book series. You just want to make sure you get if you're going to use that series, you want to make sure that you have an up-to-date version, because I've seen some Ball Blue books from, the 60s, and the guidelines have definitely changed since then about what is considered safe canning practice. So do make sure that you're using an up-to-date book. Another great resource is to go to the state university cooperative extension offices. So most states have cooperative extension offices which have really solid tested recipes, information. They're very safety focused, and so it's a great place for someone to start, just to make sure they're doing it the right way. So a lot of places you can print off information, and they also have a publication. It's published by one of the I think it's the Cooperative Extension of Georgia, but it's called So Easy to Preserve, and you can get that. Many of the extension offices, I believe, carry that book. So this, by the way, was the sort of like the textbook that we used in the Master Food Preserver course that I took. Right. Perfect. So that's a good one to have. So beyond books and website information, taking a class is a great option as well. And again, the cooperative extensions are a great place to start looking for classes. In Maine, at least, and I imagine in many other states too, there's such a growing interest in this subject that there seem to be more and more classes on kind of the basics of preserving and basics of canning. So I would just look online for classes and contact your local extension office. Perfect.
So I'm going to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
Okay. So, there are many times that I have failed. But it's funny, the one that comes to mind first and most clearly to me actually relates to gardening as opposed to canning specifically. And it's kind of funny, when I first started gardening, I thought, I can just put stuff in the soil and it'll work just fine. Works just fine, yeah. Not so much. So, I had spinach that was like an inch tall. And so that was the first time. And then I had really that same challenge ongoing. I kept thinking, okay, I'll put more in the soil. And so and it takes a lot to make your soil healthy enough and textured such that you can grow healthy, robust crops. And so that was a lesson I think I learned a few times, meaning that I think that, I thought that I had done enough, but then I hadn't quite done enough. So the biggest takeaway for me from that was just that the soil really, really needs nourishment. And maybe there are some soils out there that are already, kind of perfect conditions for growing. But I personally have not come across them. I've had 3 different places that I've lived. I've had 3 different vegetable gardens that I've established from lawn, and every single one really needs a lot of help.
Yep.
So basically, really pay attention to amending the soil and really doing soil tests and making sure that it has what it needs. And I keep thinking, gosh, it's got to be enough compost. That's got to be enough manure, and but it's not. And
Right.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So So that was those were, I would say, some of the biggest ongoing failures, and then the biggest learning for me is to now finally think, wow, my beets are actually growing now.
Right.
Yay!
Yeah. I'll tell you what, building soil is our biggest challenge and our biggest goal as a farmer, as an urban farmer, as somebody growing food. That's absolutely the thing that we have to do.
Yes, I bet, and I bet you're dealing with other issues too with an urban farm situation. Do you find that you have a lot of stuff in the soil that you worry about?
Sometimes, around houses there's lead.
Yep.
From the old paint. So I had the soil tested here at the urban farm around the house, and we didn't find any significant amounts of lead. But we do live in an urban areas, so it's something to take note of.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
I find the soil tests are super helpful.
Yeah. So what do you consider your biggest success?
I guess I would say that, honestly, working with my kids as they've been growing up is something that I find the most rewarding. And so I think in some ways, I guess it's my biggest success, though it's not completed yet.
Right.
I feel like it's something that I feel is really important, is, helping kids understand, why this matters, why we should know how to do this. And, as I mentioned earlier, I started with them when they were really little, and they mostly like it. Actually, the preserving part, they almost always like. It's the gardening that they're not always that psyched about. So so I guess I see it as a success to this point anyway of having them really, they've developed a lot of skills, and I feel proud of them for, being able to do a lot on their own, and for, knowing where it comes from, knowing how to do it, most of the time liking it. And as I said, it's not it's not complete yet. They're only 8 and 10, but I hope to continue that. It feels like a really rewarding part of this for me.
Perfect. And my next question is apropos then, what drives you?
Okay. Yes, and it is related, certainly. I feel like, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I feel like it's really important for all of us to know where our food comes from, to know what goes into it, and to, it's how we can help, ensure that we're eating healthy food, and also to, know how to take care of ourselves if the situation is, such that we're not, we can't buy food at the store for whatever reason.
Right.
It's nice to be able to grow it. And the other piece too is that, and again, this I guess relates to my kids, is that I feel like time together, you asked me what drives me. For me, it's a time that I really value with my family. It's a way of spending time. Families do different things together. But this is a lot of our time is spent doing this, and it feels like a way that is rewarding on multiple levels. And so this, not only are they learning, but like we're having quality family time together, which really matters to me, particularly as they're getting older, and their interests are broadening and, becoming maybe different than mine in many areas. This is something that we come back to, that we share, and we can kind of pick up where we left off no matter what other things they are exploring in their lives.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's also a big part of it that drives me.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm all about education, and I have to know, is there a book that has been influential for you in this process in your life?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and interestingly, the ones that most come to mind are actually the ones that they've been influential in a really practical way. They've been kind of like my, Bible when I've not been sure what to do. And a couple of them related to gardening specifically there were 2. Actually, I love the Barbara Damrush garden entrepreneur book that she's written, and that is the one that I refer to probably more than anything else, actually, for, how far apart am I supposed to space these plants?
Yeah.
Kind of nitty-gritty stuff like that. But as a result, I find that I'm looking at that book during gardening season probably more than anything else.
Oh, nice.
So it's a great one, and then the other one is, by Elliot Coleman, is the I think the one I use the most of his is the 4-Season Gardener, though I have a few of his, and his books were really useful for me in actually largely in preparing the soil over the years and thinking, okay, how do I do this? What kind of amendments can I add? Kind of more big picture garden questions. I found his books really, really inspiring, and I continue to go back to them for that kind of thing.
Perfect.
So, yeah, I love those two.
Perfect. So, Elliot Coleman, the 4-Season Gardener.
Yep.
And what was the other one? You kind of fuzzed out there.
Barbara Damrosch, the Garden Premier.
Perfect. So, what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
I would say, if you have any interest in this, just get out and try it, because it's it can seem overwhelming and intimidating at first if you haven't done it and you don't know what you're doing. It does seem that way, because it did to me, certainly. But I would say that the biggest way that I learned was just by trying it out. And with the exceptions of the canning, pressure canning versus boiling water bath canning, which are safety issues that you want to make sure that you pay attention to, outside of that, there really aren't big safety issues to be concerned about. Yeah. So, get out there and try it. Start a tiny garden, even if it's tiny. Try it, get some books out, give it a shot, and you will learn so much just by doing that. And I would say the same with preserving as well, as again, with the exception of that little canning piece. But just try it. You'll know if it's if it didn't work, you'll know differently next time. It's a lot of fun. I mean, it is physical work, so you do have to like kind of being outside and being physical. But if you like doing that, what I like about that is that it's both physical work, I'm outside, and I'm doing something productive.
Right.
So I like the combination of the two.
Yeah.
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 So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, Allison. It's been a treat getting to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Greg, for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
How can our listeners get a hold of you?
I would say my website is the best way. It's www.canningcraft.com.
Perfect.
And my email information is on the website.
Excellent. I also want to do a shout out to Pomona Pectin. That's POMONAPECTIN.com. It's a great product.
That is correct.
It's a great product, and if you haven't used it for canning, absolutely jump in. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Love it.
Super. Well, once again, thank you for being on the show, and you can find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/canningcraft. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Greg Peterson here, and I want to thank you for listening to the Urban Farm Podcast. We wouldn't be able to keep doing these great shows without you. So as a token of my appreciation, I'd like to offer you access to a list of our top 10 episodes I personally find most inspiring. If you enjoy the Urban Farm Podcast but don't have time to listen to every one, then you will love this list. Although all our guests have great information to offer, if you are short on time, these 10 are must-listens. To get access to the top 10 most inspiring podcast episodes, text FARMER to 44222. That's FARMER to 44222. And enjoy listening.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.